Hello. In this eye-opening video, we delve into the alarming issue of data theft in the farming industry. As technology advances, so do the risks associated with data breaches and cyber threats. Is your harvest at risk? Join us as we discover how cyber criminals are infiltrating farms, the potential impact on food security, and strategies to safeguard vital agricultural information. And as we explore how farmers can protect their valuable data and crops from malicious activities. Whether you're a seasoned agricultural professional or just starting out, this video is essential to understand the intersection of agriculture, cybersecurity, and exposure to international threat actors. If you find this information helpful or have a question, please leave a comment below. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more information on becoming cyber risk ready. The U.S. government has designated 16 critical infrastructure sectors vital to the national security, economic stability, and public health of our nation. Of these critical sectors, food and agriculture is one, and it includes the safety and production and delivery of food and agricultural products. As technology advances, so do the threats to our agriculture sector. Data theft in farming is becoming a serious concern, and it's time to raise awareness for this issue. Farmers rely on data to make critical decisions about planting, irrigation, and pest control. But what happens when that data falls into the wrong hands or becomes compromised? Today, we're excited to welcome Brad Fruth. Brad is the Director of Innovation at Bex Hybrid. He has vast experience in safeguarding farming operations, securing sensitive data, and protecting the integrity of agricultural systems. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be with you today. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, let's get right to it. So how are farms dependent on technology today?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that I think a lot of people might have a misconception on is that the current state of agriculture, especially when you look at row crops and even our friends on the animal side, is that we're heavily dependent on technology. I often tell people that, there is more technology in the cab of a combine or in the cab of a tractor right now than most people probably have in their offices. So lots of technology is being used, not like a lot of the other verticals that you see here in the United States. But there is lots of technology, whether it's in cab that I talked about. So it's actually software that's running in cab, or whether we talk about the business systems that are running the back-end businesses, the accounting systems, the buying and selling of anything in the supply chain, the hedging of that crop, to even physical security assets. So what's happening in my shop? What's happening with my grain bins? What's happening with my equipment? Farming is a very capital-intensive business, and so a lot of the things that we use to get those jobs done are worth a lot of money. So there's a physical side to it, and then there's also just the production side of it. Then you also, of course, get into animal agriculture, and there's a lot of really neat stuff that is going on there, but a lot of sensing equipment and a lot of things around the efficiency of how we farm.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty intense. I'm sure most folks don't understand that that level of automation and technology exists in the farming industry. So
yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about GPS and what role that plays in modern farming equipment and the increases that in efficiency that you get out of that type of activity.
Yeah, well, we joked, actually. I was at a meeting earlier this week, and in agriculture, we see what's going on with self-driving cars, and we kind of laugh. GPS technology has been around for almost 30 years, as soon as it was made available to civilians after the Air Force made it publicly available. We've been using that technology for a long time to drive equipment. So most combines, any new tractor that you buy today has auto steer technology in it. And so what it does, it allows you to set in a point, drive to a B point. It drives a straight line, and then it will drive every parallel pass to that line in a perfectly straight line. Now we're using even what's called RTK, which is auto-corrected GPS. So you'll have a cell modem within that implement that's correcting that down to almost centimeters. So we're utilizing the technology every single day here at Beck's Hybrids. And so what that also allows you to do is that first, what it did was that it made farmers more efficient. So if you can imagine, if I have a 50-foot grain head on the front of my combine, in order to be efficient, I want to make sure that every single pass that I make, that head is full and that I don't have extra gaps. You also want to make sure that you don't leave any extra crop in the field. So the first thing that technology did was it made farming very efficient in that I can make sure that every pass I'm taking 49.5 feet of that product. The second thing that happened after making the equipment efficient was now there's data that we can collect at the exact same time. So a lot of the GPS-based systems now allow you to not only do something in real time that makes farmer efficient, but then I'm collecting things like all the diagnostics of what's happening to the engine, what's also happening in the piece of equipment. If we look at planting, I can see how many seeds per acre. I can see how many skips. I can see how many doubles. I can see how much air pressure is on that thing. It's basically telling me everything that's going on in one data file. So often we talk about how important data is in agriculture, but really the efficiency of my equipment is what really drove the user adoption of that technology first. Now that we're kind of in the digital age or the data age, right? It's now what are those other attributes that I can use from the data to make me efficient? But farmers did not pay for that data first. They paid for the efficiency of their equipment first. Then it kind of led, that was really the tip of the spear that then led to all of this data that's being collected. But just to give you an idea, even as I mentioned, planting, from a GPS standpoint, not only does it make it, super straight lines, which everybody likes,
Sure.
but then too, every time I go in that field with another piece of equipment, I can pass those A/B lines. So I can run a sprayer at 15 miles an hour and not hit any crop because it's using those same lines over and over again. So a lot of really neat things happen in GPS. You can also do some fancy things like offsetting and things like that. So when you start to hear about maybe threats to GPS, that has not only an implication for the vehicles that we drive, but it also has an implication into agriculture because it's the foundation at which a lot of the equipment today is using as it moves around. And you can definitely tell fields where the GPS might have kicked out because all of a sudden you get a weird squiggly line in there, or something takes off and goes right across field. So if you spend any time on Twitter and seen some of the farming videos, you'll see guys at planting time with their feet up, watching YouTube as they're moving through the field there. So
great. Yeah, there are a couple of fields close to where I live that have some like rogue marks through them. So yeah. What about as it relates to things like water and fertilizer? How are they using GPS to distribute those and manage that?
Yeah, well, I would say a lot of when you look at inputs into the farm, so water, fertilizer, seed, even diesel and gas, right? A lot of these are probably being used more on the IoT side. And so, a lot of those are, I would call indirect products. So, farmers aren't necessarily always going out and buying a certain solution. Some of them are solutions that they're ingesting from other people. So, for example, one of the large co-ops here in Indiana is where I get my LP gas from. They have put an IoT unit on every one of my LP gas tanks. Through their app, I can see what all those levels are. I can send a message to a driver that, hey, I think I need a little bit of fuel, or I'm running a lot of fuel, so they can see what my levels are. There's a lot of things probably on the fertilizer side that are done the exact same way. Tell me what my level is and help me manage the supply chain of ordering that. When you look at water, we're very blessed here in the state of Indiana to have an abundant water supply. That is not true in all of the United States. Right. There's a whole vertical in ag around water management. And a lot of that is being done with either a cell type of a device. There are quite a few people that need maybe some more low bandwidth applications. So we see a lot of LoRaWAN that is being used there, but things around like, can I turn an irrigation pivot on? Can I turn it off? how much water is being done. Some of the irrigation pivots now even do a variable rate irrigation. So it'll put different levels and different amounts on field. So that's really the IoT. Most of the time when I think of IoT, I think of like low bandwidth. It needs to talk maybe a couple times a day there. So we also see that really prevalent in like weather instruments. So, weather instrumentation's been around for a really, really long time. It's a very mature market. There's a number of market leaders in that space. Weather stations are pretty prominent in agriculture. It's all we talk about in ag sometimes is the weather. And, we see a lot of devices out there that either sell Wi-Fi or LoRaWAN, where every 15 minutes it's sending 10 data points up into some type of service. But again, we have a couple other stations on my own family farm, but we're not necessarily going out and doing all that work. We're purchasing that as a service through a weather station provider.
I see. Okay, great. What about data security, as it relates to cyber attacks and just general farming operations? I mean, what's the impact of that? What are you kind of seeing in that space, and just what insights can you share with us on that?
Yeah, so I would say, agriculture is not immune from cyber attacks like we've seen in other verticals. There's definitely been, if you Google around, you'll see stories of, ag input providers, folks that buy and sell large swaths of grain that have gotten hit with, your traditional business, I would say cyber attacks, whether it's, ransomware, business email compromise, wire fraud, all of that. But the unique thing about agriculture that maybe stands out is the fact that a lot of people forget that in ag, we grow one crop per year. So, it's not like some people sell grain every day of the year like it is going into, a store or into a grocery store and buying groceries once a week or once every other week. A farmer takes a large amount of risk. They get paid one time per year. And that's something that those of us that, I tell everyone here at Bex, I'm just overhead. I get a paycheck every 2 weeks, that's not what happens when you're talking about actual farmers and producers out there. So when you look at attacks, for example, let's say that a company that buys farmers grain has something that goes wrong. You're talking about the entire annual income for a farmer. So not only does it impact that business, but if there's any blip in the flow of capital or the flow of cash as it's transacting, that can have some pretty big ripple effects in people's lives and in people's business. I mean, think about, Tom, if I told you that there was a financial decision for you and your family that you had to make tomorrow, and your entire annual income was based on that. Like, those are the types of decisions that farmers make. So some of this is kind of exaggerated in farming. And so that cyclical nature is not only on the selling of crop side, which I've just talked about, but it's also on the input side. There are some places here in the United States where in less than 3 weeks, the entire crop gets put in. So if there's a disruption in either the services that are being provided to that farmer or a disruption in infrastructure, right, to a LoRaWAN network, a cell network, or a fiber network, like, I just can't go plant more corn. When that window of opportunity has passed, now I have to wait an entire year cycle to do it all over again. And so that's something that is important, is that the timing and the cyclical nature of product. And once you've missed a planting window, if that miss lasts long enough, it could be that you have to wait a whole nother year, or it just might be, hey, your crops aren't going to yield as well, so you're going to take a hit, on your income potential for the whole year. So that's how important things are. And that's really at the producer level. Working for an ag input company, our business, like I said, is no different than if I worked in healthcare or retail. I mean, we're running a business, right, every day of the year here. We have employees, we have supply chain, we have finance. There's all that typical stuff. So a disruption to us is no different than, a hospital, a retail location, or anybody that's in the IT side. So hopefully that answers your question there, Tom.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that at all. The impact on farmers and how if they have type of some type of a glitch or some type of a cyber issue, they lose that planning window. And
Yeah,
I think that's something most people don't get. I certainly didn't until just now.
yeah.
So, but what about data security on a national level? So what are we looking at there, and what's that involved?
Yeah, I think the thing when I hear that question, Tom, the thing that comes to mind at a national level is that we deal with a commodity that is traded globally, right? Corn, soybeans, wheat, which are the primary ones. Those are traded, and there's a big commodity. There's a lot of dollars that follow that market. When we look at just nationally, even within the United States, there's a whole large arm of the Department of Agriculture that does statistics. And, they're estimating the yield. And that commodity market moves and changes. It goes up and it goes down. I mean, billions of dollars are moving, right? As the government is saying, here's where we think yields are. Here's where we think that here's how much corn is currently in the supply chain. Here's how many beans are being crushed. Here's how much wheat is being milled. So when I think nationally, the ability to aggregate large swaths of data and manipulate that commodity market is normally what we think of a negative effect about all of this data. So, everybody, it's no different than if you look at Wall Street, right? And the things that happen there when they're trading stocks every single day. The same thing applies in ag, but at probably slower rate. So when I think about nationally, that's what I think about the ability to take advantage of maybe exploiting data sets to be able to manipulate that market is mainly the negative connotation, on a national level. One of the other misconceptions, and I don't know if this is where you were thinking about this, Tom, but in the commodity space, these are not direct food products, right? What is it? 40% of the corn and soybeans in the United States roughly go to biofuels. Another 40% go to animal feed, and less than 20% is actually consumed. So, this definitely does affect when you look at, food, it indirectly applies to it. It probably affects more of the feed side of, the animal protein side. But, there is a lot of, there's a lot of data that goes into how much the U.S. is producing. What are we doing with our trading partners? And from a national security level, protecting that is extremely important, because in the middle of the United States here, in what I would call row crop country, we are monocrop one time per year. To disrupt anything with the production system, whether that's bricking my tractor, or causing a disruption where I can't use something, or I don't get paid for the grain that I just sold. Anything like that is more, I would say, harassment and inconvenience. But definitely being able to take advantage of the aggregation of all of that data now lets me manipulate global markets. That's maybe a little more devious than what you were thinking, but that's definitely what I think of on a national level. Now, if you allow me, secondarily to that, though, we also have the intellectual property discussion. So, I work for an input company. There's a number of genetic companies here in the United States that, we are very efficient here in the United States in how we make product and grow product. Not all those technologies are available globally because of IP protection. So, we are also, want to protect that intellectual property, and so making sure that that some of that seed product doesn't get into the wrong hands and can be exploited from a national security level. That's probably what a lot of our federal partners think about, is making sure that U.S. companies that are making U.S. investment into agriculture, get to take advantage of the U.S. market and don't get exploited.
Sure. So that leads me to a question. When you are, just a a farmer, you're planting your crops and that kind of thing, and you've got a whole 150 acres or whatever it is full of corn that has some intellectual property around it. How is that protected, and what's involved in that? Can it be protected?
Yeah. So at the individual grower level, that's not really what they think about every
Hmm.
single day. As an ag input company, that's something that we think about. So that hybrid, the physical securing of that product from a hybrid standpoint isn't that big of a deal for us. What's the bigger deal are the parents of that. So what are the male and female that went into that? So whether you're breeding corn or sorghum or cotton or rice, whatever that product is, the parent seed of that is the thing that we're protecting, and we're spending treasure and time to protect that. But the individual seed at the I would call traditional U.S. farm gate level, there's no risk there. It mainly comes into the R&D side and the actual securing a physical product. And that's why a lot of the ag input folks, if you do get a chance to go to an R&D facility, most of them are under lock and key. Some of them go to greater at different levels than others, but all the seed is protected. The physical seed is, and then you have the data side too. So we have this discussion here at Bex. If I were to tell you that hybrid A is from parent B and C, that is what we would call a trade secret. But that information is also not useful unless you have the physical access to parent B and C. So it's a two-part protection strategy of you have to protect the data and you have to protect the actual physical product.
Thanks for that. Yep. What about foreign actors? What is it that I think you see in today's market? That agricultural folks should be paying attention to.
Yeah, there are definitely some governments, and if you spend any time looking at any of the threat assessments from the federal government, you'll find the names of those folks there. There are definitely countries that want that intellectual property and want to, get it for nothing, so to speak, and want to be able to exploit that. As I mentioned earlier, the U.S. is blessed to overproduce. And so we need good trading partners that, want to buy our product, at a great price. And so protecting that, there are definitely people that want access to it. We are seeing lots of ways at which those governments are trying to access that, either physically, through tours, trade delegations, things of that nature. And there's well-documented cases out there of, folks that have been convicted for trying to illegally access product. And then we also see it on the social engineering side. A lot of our researchers get weird requests to, visit different places or to speak with folks that are out of the ordinary. But, access to that intellectual property, where maybe through a national security stance or through a trading stance they've been denied access from our federal governments, they're still seeking access to those products on the seed side.
Thanks. Well, what about, I guess that leads us into like potential vulnerabilities, from a supply chain standpoint. What does that look like, I guess, and what should we be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, again, agriculture is not immune from your typical business stuff. Unfortunately, when you look at a lot of the ag companies that have been attacked and have been used, it is no different than what you see on the IT consulting side, right? Patch your systems, keep up with good security policy, because if you don't, those are the way that folks are getting in. To my knowledge, there's a couple of incidents I know of some folks that have had some incidents. It's not been super sophisticated, right? It's been an email phish to an admin. It's been let's target a system that was supposed to be patched 5 years ago. Why are you still using Java 0.5? I mean, it sounds simple, but it gets very complex in organizations. And I think for a while too, Tom, there's been a mindset of like in ag of who would want to target us, right? Like we just sell grain, or we just sell seed, or we just sell equipment. And folks, I don't think have had a sense of urgency that, hey, you are a national security asset and you're going to be wielded. I mean, what's the famous quote from Senator Grassley? We're 9 meals away from civil war, and so the securing of our supply chain, whether it's direct food, indirect food, feed, biofuel, all of that is basically needed. So I think there's a little bit of a mindset change for those in ag, especially in ag inputs, where folks need to realize that there are threats out there. And there's certain folks that it's just typical business stuff. Like, I mean, how many emails have we got that, hey, my ACH information changed, please, change this. And so sometimes that's what it is, right? It's not that they were targeted because they're ag. It's targeted because they found another hook or they got into somebody's business email. And then there are those attacks that, are specifically targeted towards ag. I would say, here at Bex, we've definitely seen, we use a third-party MDR service, and we definitely see that at night when we're sleeping is when most of those attacks are happening. So we often we forget about what happens when we go to bed, and we don't know that, the other side of the world is still awake and very much alive. So those are some of the things. Hopefully that's helpful, but those are some of the things that I think about when I think about specifically in the ag supply chain of, issues that can come up. But just like we talked earlier in the interview, if all the grain here in Indiana is going to come in here in the next 6 weeks for the entire year, and you find a way to brick that business's ERP or their scale control system, and you've caused them to go to paper, you've caused a major disruption in supply chain. There probably isn't a modern elevator or grain handling place out there that isn't using an IP-enabled PLC system, or what's the ones that you hear about, like somebody plugged an air conditioner in, right? Because they want to be able to control it with their phone, and there's some patch that was out 6 years ago and somebody gets in through that. So there's a lot of different ways. I'm not convinced always that we're specifically the target, as I mentioned, in ag, but if they can get in and do some damage or, hold you hostage on a ransomware, they most certainly are going to do that.
That's interesting. I guess the picture that I'm getting is that, even though there's, a lot of agricultural equipment, farm machinery, basically the whole farm environment, we're really still talking about the basic security controls from, NIST, for example, that really need to be in place, specifically around things like patching and make sure your equipment's updated, and business email compromise and phishing. I mean, those are consistent across all kinds of sectors.
And I would say
it's not much different here.
I mean, I often tell people, find consultants you can trust, because you can't know everything. And, there isn't an IT person out there that doesn't have a dirty secret in their network somewhere. Okay. I guarantee it. Right. And you can have those, but you also need to understand the risk and keep them contained. I mean, there's, especially if you're running any PLC equipment, there's stuff out there, especially when you're dealing in specialized industries, that there is stuff out there that was like, hey, an intern built this 30 years ago and it just works, but yet it's critical. So it's like, okay, how do you segment that off? Right? How do you protect the risk of somebody being able to see it, or do you unplug it from the network? Right. And so those are the things, but like the biggest piece of advice I can give folks is find a consultant that you can trust and that can be there to help you and then help you respond when there's an issue. Because if there's an issue, that is the wrong time to be looking for help. And that is a wrong time to be looking for a consultant that can come out and help you. And, you don't have to be a sophisticated organization either. I mean, there's a lot of folks running small businesses on a Gmail account, in a couple computers. But, if your whole entire control system for your feed mill or your elevator plugs into the internet, you got to understand the risk associated with that. And oftentimes I think people don't understand what's happening there. So
From an agricultural standpoint, how well, there's a lot of businesses across many sectors that aren't prepared, right? They don't understand it. They're not prepared. Is the ag sector very similar? You've got large organizations like yours that
yeah.
have their ducks together, and then maybe some others that are kind of struggling.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you, Tom. I've also heard it say everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right?
I have heard that, yeah.
Yeah, I think, so I hesitate to stereotype anybody in the industry. I would just say that I don't think ag is any different than any other vertical when it comes to questions like this. There are some small businesses I know that run a really tight ship, and there are some where it's a dumpster fire. And the same can be said for my corporate friends, right? There's some people that think through really strict policy that they have control of everything, and data's flying out the back door in USB drives. And then there's also folks that have a completely wide open network, and you're like, you are absolutely going to get nailed to the wall here. So I hesitate to stereotype or try to put people into buckets there. The best way I think I could describe it, though, is that, do you have a security mindset? And when I say those words, I don't mean that you have to walk around locking everybody's computer every time you go to the bathroom, but are you at least assessing the risk? And that is super gray and it's super spongy. I can say that I'm okay with changing passwords every year. And Tom, you can go, in my organization, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard, right? That might be right for my organization. That could be wrong for yours. But I have to have a reason why. And then I have to be able to accept that risk. Because the truth of the matter is you could change your password every day and still get hacked, right? So those are some of the pieces of advice that I give people. Just know the risk, have a security mindset. That doesn't mean that drives your business, but you need to be assessing what that is. And we try to balance that at Bex all the time. We're maybe a little more cavalier than some other organizations. But it's looking at, I'll just give you an example. We implemented a password change policy here that caused some initial grief, right? And so we had to sit down and work with department managers and say, okay, here's what I want to do. That's too severe. I hear you. What is in bounds? And then after we got to that point, then it's reassessing and saying, okay, is this what are the risks associated with this? Are we okay with this? And then it was getting to that internal compromise. Now, I work for a family-owned independent business, okay? That runs completely separately than my publicly traded friends, and especially anybody that's in a highly regulated business. So take that with a grain of salt. But in ag, I think those are the conversations that we're having, right? I'm not waiting for a risk officer, or I'm most definitely not waiting for a lawyer to tell me what to do. So those are some of the things in most of the ag businesses. Let's take my publicly traded friends and put them on a shelf, right? But most of the ag businesses, those are the discussions that are happening, and how some of that works. Does that make sense, Tom?
It does, yeah. No, that's great insight. So, that kind of leads me to getting an understanding of if you're an organization and maybe you haven't had that security mindset, right? Where should agricultural folks be starting, right? Where do they even begin?
Yeah.
So on that?
Again, you need to have an IT consultant that you know and trust. Most of the time, that's the front door, honestly. For some larger organizations, there are some tools that are available at the state government level and at the federal government level. For larger organizations and even medium ones, there's some stuff that is available from CISA. They're not going to tell you what to do, though. So that's where those consultant partners, I think, are going to be key. There's a lot of small business IT groups out there that do a great job, of doing it. There's also times where you're like, hey guys, thanks for your help. We need to level up here, and I need somebody with more services, or I need 24 by 7, 365 service. So I typically start there and work my way back. I'm a big networker. I like to meet all different types of people. There's a number of people, depending on the geography where you're at. Definitely here in Indiana, there's a couple companies that would be glad to take your phone call and right size opportunities. But if you're a couple hundred employees, you're probably going to need some more sophisticated services in there, and you're going to need a little bit of a budget to help you kind of pull off those sorts of resources. But it doesn't have to be crazy. But you just have to have kind of a plan there. So how was that for a vague answer?
Good. Yeah, well, I'm going to post a couple of links to some resources in the discussion section. But you mentioned CISA, and that brings up a question about how the government is collaborating with agriculture to strengthen cybersecurity. What is it that you're seeing in that standpoint?
Yeah, we're definitely, I would say that the Department of Homeland Security is definitely well aware of the threats that are in agriculture. We've mainly had, a conversation here about IT side. There's the whole biosecurity side. There's pathogens and diseases that, could wipe out entire animal herds that our federal government is definitely monitoring. So they have a good handle on, I would say, the macro level, huge, here's what needs done. And I would say they're working with industry very, very well at that level. When you get down into the weeds though, Tom, and it's like, how do I secure this control system? How do I've got, 4,000 head of hogs in this wean to finish barn. How do I make sure that nobody can get into my control system? When you get down to those nuts and bolts, you're going to need that one-on-one consultancy thing. But I would say the government is, in my experience with the folks that we interact with, are very aware of the threats. They are still, I would say we are still relying on people to be able to raise their hand and say, here's what we're seeing. Because when they're looking at threats, especially from a cyber perspective, it doesn't say, hey, this is an attack on an energy company. This is an attack on an ag company. It's just, hey, we're all getting hammered here. So there is a desire, I think, from the law enforcement community to get more specialized data from the ag sector. But there are a lot of resources available to our friends in law enforcement. Even at a local level, most of our facilities that we've got great relationships at a state and local level with folks. If we, end up calling for help or something happens, everybody comes running and understands the threats that are associated with that, whether it's from an emergency standpoint or, something that happens at one of our places. But yeah, in what I've been seeing, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, COVID really, I think, exaggerated how efficient our food system is here in the United States, and that one little blip, can definitely have some. It's got a really big tail to it. So I think the federal government is very aware of what those risks are. They maybe don't always know what's going on or how to fix it, but they rely on a lot of partners on the ground to help provide advice there.
Great. So with that in mind, as far as public-private partnerships, if someone in the ag sector is not familiar with where to start to build those relationships, what would be a good avenue for them to pursue? How could they get more involved to bring more awareness to what's going on in the security space for them?
Yeah. So back maybe a couple years ago, in a different role, I would say find friends and like-minded people. I mean, for a while here in Indiana, they still get together. I know that there's a group of, 5 or 6 IT directors that get together in the ag space and talk about what's going on, what worked well. And all that is sitting over coffee or sitting over lunch. It's a little cuss and discuss, right? It's like, I can't believe this is going on, or daggone it, marketing did this, or HR is doing that, right? But it also provides great opportunity to learn from others that are within the exact same sector. And, even though I don't work in that role anymore, some of those folks that I worked with from other companies are still friends I can call today and pick up the phone and have that conversation with. There's a ton of really great, I would call peer groups, whether it's, in some states have a CIO, type of roundtable group or a directors group. There's a number of them here in Indiana. I know there's a great one in Iowa. That's definitely there. Every single FBI office has a public information, public person there that is a great point to reach out and get to know at every different state level. And so those are the places where I found a lot of value personally. When I'm looking at something new, my tendency is to go try to find the smartest people I can and learn as much as I can from them, and just one-on-one interactions there. But just meeting other people that are in the same sector, the same space. One of the things that is awesome is that, especially in the ag vertical, I've been working in ag for 20 years. The more people I meet, the smaller that the world is. And so, even direct competitors, we collaborate all the time on issues about security. We collaborate on threats and stuff. So just because people are maybe direct competitors does not mean in these spaces that you can't be friends and that you can't collaborate there.
Well, great. That's good insight. Thanks. And I will put links to a few of those government resources once again down in the chat below to maybe help folks, at least help them find a direction if they don't have a good feel for how to begin. So, yep. Well, Brad, hey, I appreciate the time that you've shared with me. Any final thoughts, comments that you want to share with the folks that might be watching an hour later?
I really appreciate you thinking about us. Again, ag is one of those sectors, whether you're talking about livestock or you're talking crops, that a lot of people don't think about, but yet it touches your life every single day. And so we're, especially here at Beck's Hybrids, we're committed to serving the American farmer and to driving value to them and helping them with whatever that they need. There's a lot of great companies out there that are doing the exact same thing in the ag space. So we all work very diligent every day to, again, drive net farm income, to drive value at the farm gate and help protect, one of the greatest assets that we have here, and that's land and agriculture.
Well, great. Thanks, Brad. And to our viewers out there, thank you for joining us today on Cyber Risk Ready. Once again, thanks to Brad for sharing his expertise. Brad, your contributions to helping us all better understand and defend against growing cyber challenges in the agriculture sector has been very, very informative and enlightening. So thanks again. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see everybody in the next video.